video will demonstrate how nurses can collect lab specimens using Specimen Collection Wizard. The first step in collecting a lab specimen is to review your orders. To do so, you'll navigate into your patient's chart. Once you have opened your patient's chart, you will select orders from the left-hand side menu. This opens up the Orders page. Under the View heading, select Laboratory to jump to your laboratory orders. Here I can see that the provider ordered a sodium level and a potassium level. If I scroll to the right, I'm able to see further detail. Under the Detail heading, I can see that the sodium level is ordered for a blood collection stat on April 11th at 15:02. It is also listed as a nurse collect. For the potassium level, I can see that it is a blood specimen for time study, ordered April 11th at 1500, Q6H-INT for 4 times. This translates to a potassium level being collected every 6 hours for 4 occurrences starting at 1500. Since this order is a repeating order, if I select the arrow, I can see all of the child orders, which are the single instances of the repeating order. I can see my first collection at 1500, 2100, and so on and so forth. Now that I have reviewed my orders, the next step is to print your labels. There are multiple ways to print your labels. However, the most consistent one will be to use Care Compass. Navigating to Care Compass using the header in the toolbar. Once on Care Compass, find your patient and select the arrow to open up your task list. Here I can see a lab task for sodium with the exclamation mark to indicate that it is an urgent task. I can see the potassium level below. If I wanted to see all tasks needing to be collected for lab specimens, I can navigate to 12 hours to open the further window, and I will see my next level of potassium that is due at 2100. If you hover over the task, it will tell you the tube type that you need and the volume of blood required. In this instance, I will not print the labels just yet to demonstrate the other ways to print the labels. Another way to print labels if you do not clinically use Care Compass is to use a single patient task list. This would be indicative of OR nurses or other clinical areas that do not use Care Compass. Navigate to Nurse Collect once you're in the single patient task list. Here you'll be able to see the orders that are needing to be collected. If you hover over the task description, you'll be able to see further details. Here I can see that it is a stat sodium level, and I can also see the tube type as well as the volume required. If I were to print from single patient task list, I would use the left button on my mouse and select Shift to select multiple if required. I would right-click and select Print. The wording here will always be reprint all labels, even if it is the first instance that you are printing. That is the nature of how this tool is built, since single patient task list should not be the first point of printing, except for specific exceptions. Another way to print labels is through ED Launchpoint. Navigate on ED Launchpoint to find your patient and scroll to the right to select the blood draw. This opens up the lab orders needing to be collected. Please note that STAT and ASAP orders in the ED will print labels automatically. Any other priority will require a manual print by right-clicking on the specimen and selecting Print Labels. Navigating back to Care Compass, we are now ready to print labels for our patient. It is important to understand the workflow for printing your labels. Since there are no wireless printers on the units, you will need to print your specimen labels before heading to the patient's bedside with a WOW. I will use my left button on my mouse to select and Shift to multi-select the specimens I need to collect. I will right-click and select Print Labels. This will show the label that I am printing, I will select OK. The screen can be made bigger as needed. I will select the printer and select OK. It will now bring up a second window for the next label I am printing. I will select OK and choose the printer. Please note that you are able to reprint these labels at any time should anything happen to those labels, if fluid spills on them, or if they are misplaced, ripped, etc. Now that I have my labels, I'm ready to go to the patient's bedside to collect the specimen. I will enter the patient's chart and navigate to Specimen Collection Wizard. At this point, I should be at the patient's bedside with a WOW, my labels that I have printed, and all the equipment required for a nurse collect. I will scan my patient's bracelet to perform PPID. This is important not to skip because it is a point to check your patient's identification. The patient's name, MRN, age, date of birth, and other important information can be found in the header of this collection page. For this demonstration, I will select Unable to Scan. In Specimen Collection Wizard, you can see that stats and urgent priorities are labeled with an exclamation mark for nurses to prioritize their collection. In addition, you can see all of the tasks for all of the potassium levels I need to collect. If I look on the right-hand side, I can see when they are due. They are due every 6 hours from 1500. Therefore, I have a collection for 2100, 3 a.m., and 9 a.m. the following day. This is why we suggest printing in Care Compass so that you can have a narrow hour period to only view certain tasks so that you avoid printing labels that you do not need. If you needed to print from Specimen Collection Wizard, there is a way to do so. You would select Print All Labels, and then you could deselect the ones you do not need to print. You would select the correct printer, which should default to the one associated to your patient's location, and select Print. Another way to print, if you want to print a single instance, would be to select the 3 lines, Print, and Print Label. In this case, I want to print the stat sodium and the first potassium. I will select Print All and deselect the ones I do not need. At this point in the workflow, I would be confirming my patient's identification and collecting the blood sample. Once I have collected the blood sample, I will label my tubes with the appropriate specimen labels. To scan them into the system as completed, I will use my scanner and scan the labels that are affixated to the specimen. Since I do not have a scanner in this moment, I will demonstrate how you can manually enter these. To do so, you will select the 3 lines and mark Collected. A warning will occur to identify that you have not verified it with a scan. Would you like to continue? In this instance, I will say yes. Otherwise, this is a prompt for you to use the scanner to complete perfect barcode documentation of a lab specimen. I will do the same with my potassium. In real time, if I were to have scanned those labels, they would automatically mark with a check mark without me having to manually complete them. Things to note before we close out of Collection Wizard is that the reschedule function is available here to select, but will not be enabled at Island Health. If you need to reschedule, you can keep the task on your task list and print labels when appropriate, or if you need to reschedule for a later date that is in multiple hours or multiple days, you can use the cancel and reorder function, which will be covered in another video. Select Sign. You can now see that they have fallen off your collection list since these orders have been completed because you have collected them. You can select Close to sign out of collection detail in the Specimen Collection Wizard. To verify our work, we can navigate back to Orders menu on the left-hand side. If I were to refresh this screen, I will be able to see the updated status. I can see that my stat sodium has been collected. This potassium is still ordered and not marked collected because it has a repeating lab order. We have to verify the child orders. To do so, you select the black arrow and I can see my first instance of the Q6-hour interval has been collected. And I still have collections for the 2100, 3 a.m., and 9 a.m. Eventually, when all of these 3 occurrences have been collected, my potassium will appear the same way as my stat sodium with collected. You have completed an end-to-end collection for a lab specimen.